All right, everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for standing by as we were setting up the presentation here. We're looking forward to presenting to you today about our new 2.3 version of the PI Plus model. As a quick introduction, my name is Cameron Luther. I'm an economic associate with Regional Economic Models and the business development lead for our West Coast clients from Washington State down to California and Nevada as well.
And hello, I'm Harry Walsh, also an associate here at REMI, mainly focused on the Great Lakes area and a little bit of the western part of Appalachia. So I'll be turning over to Cam to start out, and then I'll be getting into the model itself to show you some of the new features later on.
So we are going to delve into some pretty technical topics today. I would say the focus of today's webinar is very much on our newest updates to our modeling software. So it's going to help to have some familiarity with our economic modeling program PI Plus, Policy Insight Plus. For those of you who aren't as familiar, we're going to be giving a brief overview of what the model does and some of the methodology that goes into calculating some of our results. But mostly we're going to be focused on some changes from our 2.2 version of our model to our 2.3. That being said, feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar. Harry and I are going to be assisting each other in keeping track of some of these questions, and if something seems pertinent enough to kind of stop the flow of the presentation, we will kind of jump in and ask those questions of each other. So there will be a copy of today's slides and a recording of the presentation, a video recording of the presentation, and those will be sent out to all registrants for today's webinar. So you can feel free to email us afterwards with any more direct questions, but the recording should be handled automatically. Without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get into the presentation here. So, as I mentioned, today we're going to be delving into our 2.3 version of the PI Plus software. We are going to be taking a look at the broad areas that were changed in the newest version of the software. We're going to be listing those out individually and describing some of the reasoning behind the most recent changes. Then we're going to get into example applications of some of the updates and improvements we've made to the software and how we expect to improve the value of the model to economic development professionals, analysts, researchers alike. And then we're going to finish up with some Q&A. So first of all, what did we change? We, broadly, we took a look at, every year we update the data that goes into the model. So we'll be incorporating our most recent BLS and BEA data, RSQE forecasts, to give the in-model economic and demographic forecast down to the regional level, the most recent data possible. This also includes some parameter changes. We've re-estimated some parameters, which might lead to some different results from those you have seen in the past. And we have, there's been some slight changes to data sources owing to, improvements in the methodology between, certain BEA and BLS surveys and data sets. We've also added some new outputs. Some of these outputs are newer or more specific data that than we reported on previously. For instance, we're now reporting on a much broader set of demographic data down to the specific age level. Previously, we grouped those age cohorts into a larger 5 or 10 year cohorts, and now those are all broken out into 1, 2, 3-year-old groupings. Additionally, we've got some new outputs that are going to enable our Explore Connections tool, which we'll get into a bit later, to function a bit better. We've also got some new policy variables. We've changed the way certain policy variables function, and we've allowed a bit more specified application of policy variables like labor productivity and compensation. The most probably comprehensive or the largest update we've seen in the 2.3 model is in terms of interface and customizability. So there are a lot of tools that will help analysts explore the results they're seeing to inform a better economic dashboard, and to customize some of the results they see, whether they apply their own custom equations to develop new results inside the model, or whether they create new regional or age cohort aggregations according to certain reporting requirements. All of those are going to be enabled in the new model version. And then we have some smaller software updates. We've improved the robustness of the model. We've improved the speed at which it operates, and so you'll be seeing that a little bit later with Harry's demonstration. So enough gabbering from me. Let's go ahead and get into it. Data updates. The most significant data updates are gathered here. We've converted our real dollar base year from 2009 to 2012. Those who use the model frequently will remember that the default model for the default year for data entry and data representation on the outside of the model was in 2009 dollars previously, and now that'll be updated to 2012. That is a result of the BEA and BLS IO tables and data sources that we utilize in generating our model are now, in terms of have been updated this year from 2009 to 2012 dollars, and so to be in line with those forecasts, we had to update our base year as well. There basically the BLS data source is lagged behind the BEA data source as well. So actually, some of the data sources in our model are utilizing BLS data that is still in terms of the 2009 dollar base year. But we've adjusted those values to be in terms of 2012 dollars and put everything on the same scale. So there was some significant data wrangling that we had to do to get our forecast more up to date. We've also incorporated the BEA's comprehensive update to the local area personal income data set. They've made some significant methodological changes. And so, basically, we've just made use of the finer detail in that data set now, and we have utilized the there's a significantly smaller amount of aggregation that they've had to do. They're able to report down to a smaller level of detail what the county level incomes that we see in the model. So that's significantly improved the quality of the data we're able to deliver. We've also incorporated the BEA's GDP by county data. Previously, the REMI model used state GDP levels and shared those out down to the county level using county level income data. But now with this new data source, we are able to report on GDP by county using a much more hopefully much more accurate data source. So looking forward to that. So we might see some small adjustments in GDP by county in certain users' forecasts. So be on the lookout for that. We have also updated the trade flow parameters, betas and sigmas values specifically. Basically, this is a little bit complex, but within our trade flow part of the model, which basically estimates how output, the demand for output in one region is satisfied by surrounding regions. The exports that they're able to deliver to that county, and so we've re-estimated the values that determine those trade flows. The beta value is meant to represent the distance decay in the model. So for certain industries, it's less likely that they will be able to deliver to farther and farther regions. You can think of the concrete manufacturing industry and the short lifespan of wet concrete. They've got to deliver that pretty quickly, and so they're not able to have significant interregional trade linkages. But with others, like manufacturing industries, we might see a higher percentage of output in one county traded to surrounding regions. So we've updated those distance decay parameters. You can see a few sample beta values changing from current values are actually the previous values in our 2.2 and previous versions of the model. And our new estimates are the ones utilized in our 2.3 version of the model. So you can see that there are some quite significant changes in beta values there. The sigma values actually correspond to the price elasticity of demand by industry. So this is just basically the effect, for a certain dollar of price change, this is how much we expect the demand by a region for another region's exports to decrease. So that is useful in estimating how production cost changes will result in less economic competitiveness or more economic competitiveness for a given region, and we'll be able to see a production cost change example a little bit later on. But you can expect to see some of the reports that you've done previously change the data, the outputs change as a result of these parameter re-estimations. It could cause some quite significant differences in some cases. Some new outputs. As I mentioned before, we've added a significant level of detail to some of our economic and demographic results. Most of these are just previously existing economic results, but down to a finer level of detail. For example, we've got a much higher level of demographic cohort detail. We're reporting by individual age instead of by 5 or 10 year group cohorts. And we are reporting some new economic result variables as well. We are reporting on individual components of the consumption equation. So this includes, the regional effect on consumption, the age effect on consumption. Each of the individual effects in each of the individual components of the consumption equation are individually reported on, which is going to feed into the Explore Connections tool, which I teased a bit earlier. Basically, that Explore Connections tool allows us to look into a policy variable change and explore all of the causal links in the model. And what those policy variable shocks are going to affect downstream in a kind of step-by-step process. So really excited to show you guys that a little bit later. And we've got a couple of more economic result variables that we can discuss a little bit later. Some new policy variables that we're reporting on. We now have a better level of detail that we're able to adjust labor productivity and compensation in the model. For labor productivity, we have given users the option to change labor intensity while they're affecting labor productivity. Previously, one could improve the labor productivity of a given industry and see some pretty counterintuitive results where, a higher degree of labor productivity resulted in lower employment because, for a given level of output, firms were able to hire less employees to deliver that output. Now one can adjust labor productivity, assuming that the gains from labor productivity are used to create more output rather than hiring less employees, which I know is a little bit confusing, but longtime users of the model will kind of recognize the distinction. Previously, you might see some an educational initiative that would make laborers more productive, but would result in some kind of negative economic outputs as a result, which don't fit certain theoretical frameworks. So we made the model a little bit more flexible there. The compensation option for a rate change in amount, basically in the model there used to be two different policy variables, one for compensation rate, one for compensation as a level, percentage change versus level change. You can think of it as now those are collected under one policy variable, so that hopefully it'll allow people who are exploring the compensation idea to see both grouped there and to have a much better chance of finding the right policy variable for their needs, whether they're planning on changing the compensation rate per worker or the total amount of compensation in aggregate. And we have updated the detailed industry and tourism translators. Basically, that's just using more recent data on the spread of consumption to different industries as a result of new tourism spending and the kind of IO relationships for industries beyond kind of our traditional 70 sector or 160 sector setup. And I'll go quickly through these interface changes because I think they'll be better illustrated within our model demonstration. Basically, we have redesigned the navigation bar in the results part of the model. It's quicker to click through and much faster to use. Previously, you could click on some parts of the results bar and you could face loading screen or loading times that delayed your kind of click through. Now that process is much faster because the model is not loading individual graphs upon clicking on sort of summary screens. Second, we've got an impact profile feature. This is a useful basically a dashboard that economic development professionals or policymakers can take a quick glance at to get a very fast idea of what a policy variable shock might do to their regional economy and how it might affect economic competitiveness. We've got an Explore Connections tool, which basically allows users to think through how the model is methodologically processing individual policy variable shocks and can help kind of diagnose complex results one might see in the model and help make results a little bit more intuitive, if not explainable. We've got an upgraded favorites manager. So basically, we've just improved the user interface of the favorites. The favorites result creation. The favorites tool, if you haven't used it before, is basically taking model results or model graphs inside the model and saving them for quick access later on. And we've improved the import settings manager. This basically makes it more foolproof to export and import files from older versions of the model, and make sure that more and more customized parts of the model can be shifted from one version to the next, and should hopefully improve the experience from people who frequently have to upgrade old model files. And then we have the custom results tool, which allows users to take outputs in the model and combine them in novel ways to create metrics that would be of interest to them. And so we've got some interesting ways that might be used in mind for you guys to kind of illustrate that change. And then finally, we'll end off with the software enhancements. These are some smaller changes. Users are now able to view results and tables simultaneously. You can look at aggregated regions on map results in the model. Previously you couldn't. The map result would just take you down to the county level or the lowest degree of regional specification you had in the model, or the highest degree of regional specification you had in the model, rather. We've added a tree map chart option, added custom color palettes for charts that one can customize in the model. We've allowed users to integrate employment updates in the regional and national forecasts for custom industry aggregations. And we've allowed users to update population forecasts for custom age aggregations, which they were previously not able to do. So we're going to switch over to the model demonstration side of today's presentation, and some things that we're going to be thinking about are using the custom results tool to distribute economic results to different equity concepts. We are going to take a look at distributing economic results between sub-county regions using observed breakouts, and we're going to think about using unit conversions to switch maybe BEA employment concepts to BLS employment concepts. We'll also be utilizing the Explore Connections tool to diagnose outputs within the model. And we're going to be using the economic impact profile as an economic dashboard. So without further ado, we'll switch it over to Harry here.
Great. Just give us one moment as we're getting this set up. Perfect. So, let's see. Oh, yeah, we'll just move that over there real quick. Let's see. There we go. So now you should be looking at kind of the landing screen for our model here. So this at least should be familiar if you've kind of been working with the model in the last year, and I imagine many of you have. But if not, this is just kind of showing our classic, basically the mindset behind how we do our simulations. So we have our standard national control here going out to 2060, kind of our best guess business as usual forecast going out to that time. On top of that, we have a regional control. This is just a demo model. We kind of have, it's all real data, and it all has the same functionality as our normal models, but it's just anonymous data. So we're dealing with an urban, a suburban, and a rural region for this. And we've just kind of put together 3 simulations that, so we can use them as kind of thinking examples for some of the points that Cam was talking about before. So just for one of them here, we just did something very simple just to look at what happens when you're putting in a change and then some of the readouts. So we just added in this, general urban county thing that we have here. Industry employment, so just an increase, a sustained increase of 500 jobs in specifically a variety of different manufacturing fields here. So that is kind of our direct input. The results page, again, if you just give it one moment. So here's what we're talking about on the side here. We have our standard economic summary that we kind of always have in our models that give some of the standard things you'd be probably looking for in any sort of economic development or policy impact scenario. So you end up with kind of the broad things here, like employment changes, population changes, GDP, all of that. In kind of its most high-level form. And then alongside, this is what we were talking about, where you can be displaying some of the data in a table form while also seeing kind of some graphs of some of the relevant information you might be looking at. But before I even get into this directly, we just want to look at the actual movement through the model. So here we're kind of broadly in the snapshot section of the model here. So this just gives these high levels, even one is called overview. So here's what we're actually looking at. So in an actual scenario, you'd be seeing whatever region you'd be working in, whether it was your state or a collection of counties, a collection of states right here. But now you can see kind of what we're working with: urban, suburban, and rural. And you just get this kind of general readout, and you can see a change year on year. We're looking at, say, urban counties, and just get the high-level impacts of what's going on now that we've added in, say, directly these 500 manufacturing jobs. You can see that work through the model, it ended up getting about 1,700 jobs in terms of total employment increase. So then all of these kind of break these elements out a little bit more. Employment, GDP, you can see you have a little bit, some of the elements, each industry being represented here at a kind of high-level standpoint. So what you might want to do is go into some of these side areas here and say the analytics is something we're going to spend a lot of time in right now, because there's kind of a lot here. This is one of the big features that we're really excited about in this new model, that we're able to kind of really like tell the story of how your analysis or how whatever impact you're putting in is going through the model, because we want to really be as transparent as possible when we're using the model. And also just, as legible as you can. So if you put in a change, you see something you might not expect. Why did that happen? And that's something we'll go through here. Before we get to that, so going from the snapshot side of things, you can get much more into the detailed side of it. So just the same thing, if we go to employment, before it even gives you something that spits out, we have kind of all these different things that you can pull out of this broad category of employment. Same thing, production. You might be wanting to look at trade flows or trade shares. And industry impact, you can go into any industry and look at the specific changes here, as well as prices. Same thing, demographic. We have this full demographic modeling capacity, so you can really pull apart why is population moving into or out of an area, why is birth rate changing, why is death rate changing, and kind of all of that good stuff you'd be looking for. And then we have this favorites, which we'll pull up in another example. We'll show you kind of what favorites can do. But first, we just wanted to look at this impact profile. So it's basically taking that same information that we had in the snapshot thing, but presenting it in a little bit more of a usable way. It gives you kind of these high-level results that you're probably looking for. So you get the aggregate effect, these all regions, what's going on in terms of employment increases, and then it also breaks it out specifically by the different regions. And we even kind of have that a bit more explicit here, where it literally ranks kind of from top to bottom where the impact's coming from. So this, you can see very little rural, but rural would be kind of a very tiny line right on top there. And so you can really see when you're putting in a project, maybe a given county is going to be getting a specific, say, industrial development, but you want to see which of the surrounding counties, due to their economic makeup, is getting the most benefit. Maybe they're providing a lot of the inputs to that that new industrial development. And as you can probably expect, we have this urban county, and the suburban counties the urban county had the direct impact, the suburban county has some of the indirect impacts over time here. And you can do that. We're just looking at employment as an example, and you can take that employment and kind of show it, change it out by region. You can go, this is probably a good time to take a look at some of these buttons that we have here. So just to display some of these, this information, as you're seeing, I didn't do anything custom for any of this. This is just what kind of comes out of the box with the model in terms of displays. You can take anything like employment by region, and we kind of want to marry the idea of giving you something right from the start so it's usable. You can just kind of plug and play immediately with the software, but also there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of inputs you can put in. There's a lot of outputs, as you can see, that happen, and a lot of them can be broken down by a variety of different classifications. And so what you can do is you can take, of course, say this information, and you say, I don't want it like that. You can very easily just say, just give me the information as a table. You can change it out, kind of any of the things here that we're looking for. The stack bar chart that we're looking at, an area chart can always be a little bit interesting to look at. Just keep it there. Industries by year, and you can change out really whatever you're looking at. You take out, say you just want to get the major sectors. You're a little less concerned about specifics in terms of what type of manufacturing is going on. You just want to see, okay, we added in 500 direct, but it generated almost 600 in terms of new manufacturing jobs. So you can use basically a lot of these buttons here to customize it by what years you want, which regions do you care about looking at, and then overall just kind of general. You can pivot and say, instead of each column being the year, you say, I just want to look at each year, but I want to pull out the industries right here, the regions, excuse me, here to take a look at those. So this is just kind of something good when you're, say, trying to produce a report, or you're just trying to give an answer of, okay, we're trying to run this analysis. Here's what's actually happening in the analysis. And so that's kind of the broad overview of just the base capacity here. I'm going a little bit faster than I normally would, just because I'm assuming a certain level of familiarity. Certainly feel free to reach out to us after this if there's anything where you're like, whoa, let's slow down and kind of go through this a little bit more specific. So that, I just wanted to use a simple simulation to give you an example there. Now, if I get out of that and go to something a little bit more, esoteric, if you will. So we're looking at a production cost increase here. So this could model a variety of different things, but it's basically costs are going up, and we just did the same thing, manufacturing in this urban center. So production cost goes up and sustains by 1% starting this year, 2019, and continues out into the future, just in that urban counties.
Some people might use this setting to look at the impacts of an onerous new regulation that's causing some increase in cost for manufacturing industries.
Sure. And so you can probably expect, as you might imagine, if cost goes up, you're seeing a lot of negatives here. You're seeing a lot of increases except in just about everything except in the price index here. We're seeing a cost increase. But while that might be intuitive, you probably want to break down why there's a certain cost, why this cost is filtering through this way. And maybe you have kind of a variety of different costs that are going on at the same time, and you really want to tease out what is the actual ultimate effect of this specific cost. And so here we can go into this explore connections thing that's entirely new. So first off, you can pull out any of our normal results and look at it in this scenario, but what we probably want to do is these policy variables. So you can see it says converted user policy variables. The model knows this is the only thing that I impacted here, but you'd see anything that you input manually to the model. So here, if I just go through, because the model has to kind of convert it, you're going to be getting basically every single step, every thought that the model's getting. So you're going to see a lot of these kind of intermediate steps. You have everything here, just you can read it basically left to right. So if I start, say, with this here, relative cost of production, this is what we're actually looking at for, let's do all industries. You can see the determinants, so left to right, all of these different things. So composite factor costs, fuel costs, all of this goes into the relative cost of production. And then the relative cost of production itself is determining certain things here. So say imports change, if cost of production is increasing, as we can see it is. You see that foreign imports, which are relatively a bit cheaper now, become a larger share of what people are consuming. And the kind of core assumption to the model is that when you have a cost increase in businesses, most of that, if not all of that, is going to be passed on to the consumer. So you have this relative cost of production increase, and you can see very similarly this relative delivered price also increases as well. And we're seeing that basically all else equal. And I hope you can see that we were just here, so we're now flowing over to the next one, relative delivered price. With delivered price increasing, the overall prices are increasing, and you're seeing with basically income still the same level that it was at, you're seeing that real disposable personal income and personal consumption expenditures are declining in relative terms, facing these new prices. And so spending in an area, of course, consumption, there's a certain level of demand generated by all the people that are spending in an area. And so when that falls, when you're having this personal consumption expenditures fall, the demand, of course, is necessarily falling, and all of that consumption, all the spending on restaurants and movie theaters, on clothing, and all of kind of the not necessarily luxury, but kind of the things that people choose to consume when they have a little bit extra on them, all of that starts to decline a bit because people are paying more for what they're already consuming. And so you're seeing partially the local consumption demand and the employment dependent on that are all declining. And that's kind of one of the largest things that's contributing to this employment decline here. But you can see that is just one thread that I followed to get to this. Employment is determined by kind of a variety of things. And if you're interested, this is probably going to look a little bit intimidating if this is your first time seeing it, but we have all of the models or equations now hard-coded into the model itself in a way that we hope is a little bit more readable. So you see all of this. Each of these is a variable that is defined fairly rigorously, but I'm not sure if anyone memorized each and every single one. So you can take, say you're looking at this E, which is employment. Anything you click will just pop up with a definition. You say, okay, what are all of these things that are going into it? And you just click on them. Intermediate demand employment, and it gives you a little definition of what each thing is. And this is the kind of direct thing that I was pulling out, which is this one variable, local consumption demand employment. So just all the employment necessary for local consumer goods to be provided, just as an example here. So this is one situation. So we started with this increase in production cost. We saw initially, just in, say, the impact profile, that you can see this is negative, that employment is declining. And so we wanted to figure out why exactly is that happening. And then we were able to go through, kind of in what I just did here, all the different steps of cost of production affecting prices overall, consumption expenditures declining, and then, because consumption is declining, the employment dependent on that is declining, and thus overall employment is declining. So you can take something that you might be a bit familiar with, and you can at least justify why something is happening. If you see a result you're not quite sure on, you can kind of back it out. And so we really don't want the model to be a black box that is kind of, you put something in and you get an answer out. We really want to be able to step through why everything is happening, even if there are quite a bit of different interlocking equations going on. So now that we've kind of taken a little look at that about what this thing is, let's take something that might be a little bit less intuitive, or you might not have a clear, solid idea of what will happen with certainty. So we have this example of basically training people in computer tech. So this can be a variety of different jobs here, and we're doing 250. We just did basically 1,000 people getting occupational training in computer occupations in this urban county, just like 1,000 people a year. There's maybe some training program, or it's a college or whatever it is, producing this labor supply. And that is a big thing to keep in mind with what I'm going to show you is this is just increasing labor supply. So this isn't 1,000 more people employed in this. It's just 1,000 more people who are now in the mix, who could potentially be hired by employers. When you look at the results, they're a little bit more interesting than kind of the examples we've been talking about before. So just looking at the graph, you see the zero line here. You see a bump in the first few years, and then you see a decline. Now, these are relatively small numbers, so you see total employment fall by relatively small amounts here, like the percentage changes. It's less than 0.1% changes. So don't go freaking out that this is like a huge crash after this. But you're training people regularly. You see this short-term spike and then a decline. So why is that? So here's what we can do: is we can take this model linkages, the connection explorer, and do the same thing that we just did. So occupational training, and again, this is the model filtering. So one of the main things that goes into occupational training, we're just looking at computer occupations here, is it feeds right into these access indexes that we have, access indices, access productivity index. So the assumption is when you have a larger labor supply for employers to pull from, that they can find basically better fits for their positions. So they can find people who are relatively more productive, and the idea is, well, productivity will rise, costs in terms of labor costs will fall, which we can see if we see this labor access index, seeing kind of all industries going together here. But you see labor access index increases initially, and then you see it kind of comes to an equilibrium over time. But this initial increase, it can actually result in a bit of an employment drop. Because the idea is you can find maybe one candidate that's very productive, and then previously you needed two employees to do the same amount of work. So you see a little bit of there's a potential, actually, I shouldn't say that you always see this. There's a potential to see a bit of a loss in employment here. So just if we go through, same thing, it's just a moving average that determines it. You're seeing over time, and this is all industries together, that's why you get a little bit of a parabola here, but you see labor productivity kind of increasing over time. And I'm trying to pick like a good example here of something like, see if I can pull that up, just like data processing. So something that is very heavily dependent on computer training. So you're seeing a little bit of a shift over. The labor productivity is a little bit spiky here, but you're seeing costs falling for the most part here. Labor costs, it's mostly due to that. What I was talking about is you can find better candidates to fill your positions. And you're seeing a little bit of a shift actually away from capital intensity in this situation. Sometimes you see a shift over more to capital intensity, but in this case, there's actually a little bit less dependency on capital, as you're seeing a little bit of an increase in labor productivity over time. And so you end up with relative composite labor costs declining. And you actually see kind of ultimately, at first we started with, or in the previous example, we started directly impacting production costs. But here's a situation where we started from somewhere else. We started from labor supply, and you can see how this story kind of connects into this relative cost of production by doing that. And kind of for the same reasons that I described production costs rising and kind of the negative impacts it can have, with production costs lowering, you're seeing all of the same things that I had talked about before declining. So cost of production declines, relative delivered price declines, price index declines, kind of all these things, and you start to see some of the changes going on. So with that, something that we wanted to get into is the favorites. So something we can do here, say if we want to look at the employment by industry. So we just did this computer tech training, and so obviously that's going to have a disproportionate effect on certain industries versus others. So what we might want to do here is take this raw employment by industry data and say we want to format it in a certain way. So this can be telling, like we can take a look and see what's being impacted the most by, let's see here, what's being impacted in the short and long term by some of these things. So what we might want to do is take something like this. First of all, get rid of all industries because that's kind of double counting here. Take that. We take the best display. I probably want to do something like just a simple bar chart here. And then we have, we want to have the same pivots. So the bottom axis are just the industries. We're having it, I see what's going on. So first thing we want to do, change the units, because we're dealing with such small units. Sometimes trying to look at thousands is a little bit too much. Here we can actually take a look at which industries are being impacted here. So I want to make sure that this is running through. So you can see some of the things that are being impacted. Publishing industries, I see, because we're in 2018. If we go to like, say, 2022 out there, you're going to see the change a little bit. So you're going to see an increase in certain industries and a decrease in others, basically. And again, these are relatively small changes, but with this occupational training and labor supply, after a certain time period, after the market's kind of adjusted, compensation has changed, the employment levels have kind of leveled out a little bit. Here you can just take something, take the data, format it in a way, we're just looking at the differences in this scenario, and we just did a simple bar chart so you can see what went up, what went down. You've seen a little bit of decline in construction jobs, you've seen retail trade decline. Two things I really wanted to point out was professional, scientific, and technical services, administrative support services, and then you have a little bit of the arts. I believe also management was one of the ones that had a bit of decline here. And so from that, say, for example, this is something you'd want to save. You kind of customize this a little bit, and while you can go back and customize it, you might not want to save it exactly like that. So you might not want to have to recreate the work that you were doing previously. So what you can do is you can just add this with a new favorites group. And then here we just have this new group that we just created here. And you'll have that saved. And you can kind of go in and do whatever you need to do here. You can change the name to whatever it is. If you say have multiple projects you're working on, example group, will cooperate with me. And just from right in here, if you wanted to say add another visualization, you can take something like, let's see, whoops, sorry, the keyboard's a little bit different. You can take something like compensation, just as an example, and add that in, update the results table. And yes, I'm fine with that not being named anything. Save it like that. And so in that situation, I went through the model normally and kind of arrived at this and then wanted to save it. You could also say, I'm, again, trying to produce a report or something, and you can select what are the things you're going to want. You're probably going to want, GDP changes. You're probably going to want employment changes. Maybe you're concerned about compensation rate changes because of this. And so you can take that and do everything that I was just talking about, but right from here and kind of keep it saved as a chart here. So just do that, and as an example, go and look at industries by year. So just being conscious of time, that is kind of the high-level overview for that, for just displaying some of the data, for getting favorites groups, for walking through the model in terms of connections. And just the one other thing I wanted to point out before I turned it back to Cam for any remarks that he had, is this, so I'll just save that there, is this some of the customization options that we have now. So the custom results a little bit meatier, but custom aggregations, basically we don't have a whole lot of regions to play with here, but you could say, okay, we're doing something where we just want, you could have several groups. You could do something like, we want to put the urban and rural, we want to separate urban, suburban into one, and then rural into another. You can save it like that, press OK, and then in the model itself, you'll be able to kind of keep those aggregations. You can do the same thing with any of these here. And then same for custom results. So we have a lot of indicators, and we have a lot of things that could potentially be indicators. And we talked about this a little bit before, but you can just do something if you're doing say a unit conversion. You can just adjust by constant factors. You can do a weighted spread if there's, say, a constant amount of spending or of jobs that will be split up between regions in a certain way. You could just keep that weight and make your life a lot easier. And something that's kind of flexible, and I'm interested in seeing what some users come up with in the course of their work, is this define equation. So you can just kind of, as you imagine, if you have this equation, you can take kind of whatever you want, average annual compensation rate, and something that's, completely, that I'm just completely choosing here, average annual compensation rate and the consumer access index for whatever reason. You'd want to combine those. And you can just, in this case, you can just do multiplication and division based on what these things are. You can see one's a ratio and the other is it's thousands of dollars. And you can customize these outputs, and these will appear in the model. It's kind of one of the lines of readout. I'm not going to save that. This was just one example that we had kind of put together a little bit beforehand. So if you wanted to look at, say, when you're seeing change in personal income or disposable personal income over personal income, and so this would produce a ratio with just the division. And so you could see, while overall income might be changing, how is that actually relevant to how much people have extra to spend if you're trying to look at maybe some social impacts in some of these scenarios. So with that was kind of a lightning round view of some of the new features of this model. Cam, do you have anything to add before we address any questions? Or
no, I think that's good, and I hope that the kind of takeaway you got where the model is being upgraded significantly, and we've got a lot of really exciting new features that hopefully should allow users to deliver the impacts that are most pertinent to their situation. So we want to see this model better able to kind of deliver exactly the types of outputs that are going to be most useful to people. So hopefully the experience of switching from model year to model year is a lot smoother from now on, and the model kind of has all of the characteristics that individual users like to use. I know we have users in the Bay Area that like to have specified regional aggregations or year aggregations that they use from year to year for specified reporting requirements, and so being able to kind of import those settings from model to model and to have those more effortlessly integrated into model runs should hopefully deliver a lot of value.
Great. So if anyone has any questions, we'd be glad to answer them now. We'll be having a second part to this training series. Is it later this week as well?
Yeah, on Thursday at the same time.
Thursday at the same time. And that'll kind of get into some of the actual modeling and how to use the software.
No, Thursday at the same time this week is going to be a repeat of today's presentation. Next week, Tuesday and Thursday from 2 to 3. Same times as this week, we'll be getting into a little bit more of developing a methodology and creating simulations, tutorials in that space.
Great.
Yeah, but we'll stick around for the next couple of minutes. Feel free to lob some questions our way. But otherwise, you should be getting a copy of today's seminar recording and slides sometime later this week. All right, we'll be logging off here. Feel free to email us later with any of your questions. Thanks so much all for joining us. Bye-bye.